Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir, we do.
So is this slide visible in the full screen mode?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So let us quickly finish this. Then let us move to discrete time systems. So in the discrete case, we have this formula for the signal energy. And as we had discussed last time, that signal energy is related somehow to the length of the vector. Suppose you have a vector made up of the samples of a signal, then if you take the inner product of the vector with itself, then that gives you the energy. Okay, those guys who know what is inner product of a vector with itself. Suppose you have a vector x under bar, then if you do a x transpose x, or if x can have complex numbers, then you do x Hermitian x. That will give you the energy of the signal, because a discrete signal can be represented in terms of a column vector. So I hope some of you understand what I'm saying, particularly the masters people. They would better understand. The UG guys, those who are exposed to linear algebra, they would understand what I'm speaking. So somebody was asking me why there is a mod square. That mod square happens because of that formula. Okay. Somebody was asking me that why they had a doubt that why we have a square after the mod. So that this answers that question. So shall I go to the next slide?
Yes.
Okay, so if you see here, we have a discrete signal, and now you have the discrete signal has both positive and negative samples. So xn mod square will have this kind of a behavior, and then you take the sum of it. That means you're taking the area under this second curve. That is signal energy. So this is a way to interpret signal energy. There is a small example. So you can just look at this example. And we'll be using this formula a lot. So this is the finite summation formula. There is a series r to the power n, and there are only n terms in that series. So this formula we are going to use. This is going to come up a lot in our DSP course. So you should be familiar with this formula. Okay. You're done. Shall I go to the next slide? Those who want to write, they can write. Okay. So this is the same thing that we discussed for the continuous time case. Now you see there's a special notation here, summation n subscript equal to angle brackets capital N. So it means that you are summing over any set of consecutive n indices exactly capital N in length. It can be from 0 to n minus 1 or something like that. Done?
So in the first equation, the sigma minus n to n or n minus 1?
No, because it is division by 2n. Nah? Otherwise, if you put as minus n, then it will be 2n plus 1, right?
2n, yeah.
In many textbooks, they have it as 1 by 2n plus 1. Okay. So you can check in various textbooks, they have various formulas. Okay. A small example. So you should just note how they are simplified each term. Hmm. So you need a lot of practice with these problems because it's easy to know the formula, but application of this formula requires a little practice. Okay. So shall I think we are finished with the slides. So let me go to discrete time systems. Okay. Okay, can you see the slide in full screen mode?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So we start with the definition of system, like what a system is. So when we deal with physical systems, they mean some things. For example, a physical system can be a filter. So it can be a circuit, maybe with a resistor and a capacitor, trying to like approximate a low pass filter. But in mathematics, system is an operator or a linear transformation because we are dealing with linear systems. So we restrict ourselves to linear transformations. So it is also called an operator and it maps a function to a function. This is something that you should note. So y is equal to h of x. So it is that system is mapping x to y, x function to y function. So there is a notation here. There is an arrow here. And one has to be careful that the arrow symbol should not be confused with the equal to symbol. So we talk about linear transformations, and linear transformations are executed by matrix operations. So a matrix is a linear transform or an operator which produces a linear transformation. So generally we will talk about a system, a linear system, and we will try to describe the linear system by what is called the transfer function of that system. Or in image processing, we call that as the point spread function. So you might be aware that the impulse response or the transfer function, they are defined by the use of the Dirac delta or the Kronecker delta. So the response of the system to a Dirac delta gives you the impulse response. Similarly, for a discrete case to a Kronecker delta gives you the impulse response of the system. Now, for a camera, as I said, like a camera is a linear system. Now, a camera, when it captures the picture, it takes through it various weighted impulses. If you imagine that the scene is composed of a sheet of Dirac delta impulses, okay? You can imagine that you have a picture of a maybe something like a table where there are a lot of objects kept, okay? And there is lighting from the top. So if there are objects kept on a table, there will be different brightness depending upon the shape of the object. So if there is a spherical object, then the front of the object will be shining brightly depending upon where the lighting source or the bulb is kept, and the back of the sphere will be slightly less bright. So there will be shading across the objects. So that shading can be approximated by 2D function, or I can say like in 3D, you can imagine that there is a surface of Dirac delta impulses. And because I'm talking about continuous case, you can imagine many infinite Dirac delta impulses on the surface. Okay. So those Dirac delta impulses are weighted by the intensity of light. Now, each of these Dirac delta impulses, they pass through the camera and they are transformed by the camera by the point spread function of the camera or the impulse response of the camera into what you observe on the screen of the camera. So a red sphere looks red in color, it has a certain brightness. All that happens because of the system, that is the camera. So if I change the system, if I have a different kind of a camera, then I will observe a different image, or I will observe something different. Even though the scene remains the same, the scene is constant, but the camera changes or the system changes. So the signal remains the same. So the X signal remains the same. The input remains the same. The Y changes because the system changes. So this as an example, I'm just saying that you can imagine that there is a tree below which there is grass, and through the leaves of the tree, the sunlight is getting filtered. Can you imagine a scene something like that? All of you are able to hear me. Can you imagine something like what I've just described? All of you? I'm trying to visualize what happens when an input signal passes through a system. Okay? Are you able to hear me? Give me some feedback.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
So we say that we have a dappled surface or dappled, like maybe you can imagine that you are just lying under a tree and there is bright sunlight, there is sun above, and the tree has many leaves, dense leaves, and the light of the sun is getting filtered through those leaves and it is coming down and falling on the grass below. And the grass blades are shining with they're shining because the sunlight is passing through the leaves. And each of those small, what do I say, the speck of light or the speckle of light is can be thought of as the image formed by a pinhole camera. I'm not going too much into a pinhole camera and all that, but the slit that is produced by the space between two leaves when the light passes through it is like a pinhole. And the light passes through that pinhole and falls on the grass, and you observe a certain pattern, and that pattern is your image. So light from the sun is coming through a pinhole, so it is passing through a pinhole camera and falling on the ground, and you can observe a certain dancing set of circles on the grass. Have you ever observed such a thing? Have you ever observed while you did a hiking or went on a nature trip, and did you observe like circular uh, patches of light on the ground below a leafy tree? Have you ever observed such a thing? Anyone? So what is happening is that the sun is being imaged by pinhole cameras. There are so many pinhole cameras which are found by the leaves, and on the ground, the sun is being imaged by the pinhole cameras. So you can imagine this kind of situation, and you can imagine that uh, uh, whenever you take a picture through a camera, you have a sheet or a surface of Dirac delta impulses which are weighted by the intensity values, and when you pass it through a system, you get a signal, that is your Y signal. Why am I saying all this? Because I can write x of n as summation k equal to minus infinity to plus infinity x of k into delta of n minus k, right? All of you remember this formula?
Yes.
So when I come to the convolution equation, I'm going to use this formula, and we are going to derive y of k equal to summation k equal to minus n to plus n, or 0 to n minus 1, h of k into x of n minus k. So that derivation comes from this idea. Okay, the idea that you have a set of weighted Dirac delta impulses passing through a system. Okay, so let us go slowly. So often, if you have doubts, you can ask me. Okay, you need not stay quiet. So often a system defined by an operator h and having the input x and the output y is represented in terms of a block diagram. So generally in control systems, you see those block diagrams. So this notation comes from that block diagram. So you can have signal flow graphs also. So several notations are there. So you can have a series connection of two systems or a parallel connection of two systems. So the cascade, you can have the operations like this, H2 operating on H1. And in the parallel, the Y signal is computed from X by H1fx plus H2 of x. So these are two ways by which you can interconnect systems. So we have just did an overall view of what a system is. I've given an example of a camera, which is a system. I have not yet introduced the properties of the system, like linearity, time invariance, all those things I have not introduced. So let us slowly go and do those things. So a system is said to have some memory if for any integer n naught, y of n naught depends on xn for some n not equal to n naught. Okay. So if yn naught depends only on n naught, then the system is said to be memoryless. So memoryless systems are not very useful. A system which has memory is more useful. So now, why would you want a system to be having some memory? So let me give you a very specific example. So those of you like, I don't know, like some of the UG people might have done my statistical signal processing course last semester. I don't know, some people may have done it. If they have done it, then they may remember me giving me an example of the vocal tract. So our vocal tract is supposed to be a filter through which what can pass through a filter? An impulse. What is an impulse for the vocal tract? Gusts of air, which we push from our lungs into our vocal tract. Our vocal tract is residing inside our neck. So when we speak, we are pushing from our lungs air through this filter. And this filter takes input as weighted Dirac delta impulses. Okay. And it passes and does some operation. What operation it can do? A linear filter will do convolution. So it does convolution and produces an output. So that output is our voice. Now we can modulate our voice. We can sound like a male. We can sound like a female. We can make different voices. We can, on some days when we have a problem with our throat, our voice sounds in a different way. Normal days, our voice is different. So our filter changes, and that filter can be modeled by what is called an all-pole model. We'll come to an all-pole model. You might have learned about it in Laplace transforms and all that, but I'll come to all-pole modeling in Z transforms. So we'll look at an all-pole filter. So it is possible to describe the signal or the filter as an all-pole filter, and the input signal x of n is said to be correlated because it can be represented as a linear sum. Okay, and we talk about what's called linear prediction. Those of you who have done data communication, you would have come across an LPC coder or a linear predictive coding. Okay, so I don't know whatever I'm saying, is it going over your head or what? Like, you can just give me some feedback. Have you heard about these things? Linear prediction? Anyone?
No, sir.
Yeah. So some of you have gone through these ideas. So when I said that the system is memoryless or a system is having some memory, I'm reminded of signals having memory. For example, what kind of systems signals have memory? Have you come across such things in stochastic or random processes? Anyone? Anyone? Have you come across a Markov sequence? Anyone? Yes or no? Have you heard about a Markov sequence? Have you heard about pth order Markov or first order Markov? Okay. So there are these signals which are like dependent. Their samples are dependent. So you can say that a particular signal at a particular time n is dependent on the sample at n minus 1, n minus 2, n minus 3 up to n minus p. Then it is called a pth order Markov. So suppose n sample is dependent only on n minus 1, nothing else, then it is called a first order Markov. So because we are talking about memory, so I'm just tempted to introduce these ideas. So a memoryless system is a simple system but not very flexible, since its current output value cannot rely on past or future values of the input. Generally, future values we don't consider because we consider causal signals. So the next definition: a system with input x and output y is said to be causal if for every integer n naught, y of n naught does not depend on x n for some n greater than n naught. That means your y signal doesn't depend on the future values of x. It only depends on the past values of x. So the present and the past values of x. But such a system is more desirable because non-causal systems cannot be physically realized. Can you give me an example of a non-causal system? Anyone? Anyone? Give me an example of a non-causal system. You have been doing it left and right in your signal and systems course. What is a non-causal system?
Ideal low pass filter. Ideal
Yes.
filter.
Yes, an ideal low pass filter is a non-causal system. Good. What's your name?
Madhukar.
Yeah. So it is supposed to be non-causal because if you take out the impulse response, the impulse response exceeds, is in the negative time domain. So it is a non-causal system. So the independent variable n represents time. A system must be causal in order to be physically realizable. That's why you cannot physically realize an ideal pass filter. So non-causal systems can sometimes be useful in practice because the independent variable need not always represent time. So sometimes you can represent position. So an image can be formed by the use of non-causal systems. So whenever an image is blurred, that is, whenever an image is low pass filtered, whenever you have a camera shake, you are doing non-causal filtering. Okay. Just to poke your interest, I'm just making these statements. So a signal can be a 1D signal, it can be a 2D signal. For a 1D signal, the independent variable is time. For a 2D signal, it can be position, x, y. So the inverse of a system. So how do we define an inverse? The inverse of a system H is another system H inverse, such that the combined effect of H cascaded with H inverse is a system where the input and output are equal. So a system is said to be invertible if it has a corresponding inverse system. So not all systems are invertible. Okay, so we have to be careful. So a system is invertible if its input X can always be uniquely determined from its output Y. So this is something that is important, uniquely determined. There should not be a many-to-one mapping. So when you invert, there should be a one-to-one inverse. So this is something that one should be careful. Although, like, we think in terms of this invertibility of function, but invertibility of a function and invertibility of systems are actually different things. Okay. So system involves mapping between functions, whereas function involves mapping between numbers. So although they are similar, but they are different. So an invertible system will always produce distinct outputs from any two distinct inputs. And to show that a system is invertible, we simply find the inverse system. And if we have to show that it is not invertible, then we find two distinct inputs that result in identical outputs. That means we are showing some kind of a many-to-one mapping. And in practical terms, invertible systems are nice in the terms that the effects can be undone. So if you can find a system H and you can find the H inverse, then you can undo that effect. For example, echo cancellation. So when you have long transmissions of voice, there can be echoes produced in the channel. So how do you cancel out the echo? So you try to find the equalizer. So echo cancellation is done by using an equalizer. I'm not going to talk about these things, but I'm just hinting at you that inverse systems are useful, because if there is a degradation caused by a system, then if an inverse of that system exists, then that degradation can be removed. So bounded input, bounded output stability, all this you have studied. So I'm just refreshing these things. So a system with input X and output Y is Bibo stable if for every bounded X, Y is bounded. So the basic statements about Bibo stability. And so if you see here, a system that is not Bibo stable will have serious safety issues. For example, an iPod with a battery input of 3.7 volts and headset output of infinity volts would result in one vaporized Apple customer and one big lawsuit. So this is something that one should be careful while building systems, so that they are stable systems. Now let us talk about our LTI systems. The first property that comes to our mind is time invariance. The similar property in 2D systems is called shift invariance or position invariance. So when I talk about images, I talk about cameras being position invariant or shift invariant, which are systems in for 2D signals. So for 1D signals, we talk about time invariance. So if for every sequence x and every integer n naught, the following condition holds, then you can say that the system H is time invariant. So if there is a time shift in the input signal, either an advance or a delay, then the result is an identical time shift in the output signal. And a system that is not time invariant is said to be time varying. So similarly, we say that all cameras are shift invariant in the ideal case or in the trivial case, and in the general case they are all shift variant. Why? Because with a camera you can take a picture of a scene which is 3D. Now a scene which is 3D, just to give an example, if you take a picture of yourself standing in front of, say, a blackboard, and there's something written on the blackboard, and you focus your camera on your face, what happens to the text that is written on the blackboard?
Blurs.
It gets blurred out. That means the system that is taking the picture, it is not position invariant. So the signal which is coming from your face is getting mapped in a different way as compared to the signal that is coming from the background. That is the blurred background. So we say that when you move the camera, different objects, they move in a different way. Okay, that is called parallax. When you sit in a train and the train moves, then you observe outside, the things which are closer to you are moving faster as compared to things which are further away from you. So that is called motion parallax. So different, the same thing would happen when you actually observe a scene through a video camera, and the video camera is moving or it is translating. So in that case, you will see that different objects are moving in different ways. So the camera is operating in such a way that different parts of the scene, they are transformed in different ways. That should not be the case. All parts of the scene should be transformed in the same way for shift invariance. So if you would be observing a planar scene, for example, only the blackboard, then if you move your camera, then everything on the blackboard will move with the same speed. So then you are producing a shift invariant system. So a camera is shift invariant at best, or in the trivial case, but in the general case, it is shift variant. So similarly with normal 1D signals, so if a system is behaving in an ideal way, that means if you shift the input signal by some factor and the output also shifts by the same factor, then you say that the system is time invariant. So compared to time varying systems, time invariant systems are much easier to design and analyze since their behavior does not change with respect to time. That is the important idea. So then let us go to linearity. We have discussed time invariance, and let's go to linearity. So here there are three things: additivity and homogeneity. So these two properties, they create the linearity property. So superposition or additivity. So system H is said to be additive if for all sequences x1 and x2 the following condition holds. That is, H commutes with sums. And the system H is said to be homogeneous if for every sequence x and every complex constant a, the following condition holds. So H commutes with multiplication by a constant. So a system which is both additive and homogeneous is said to be linear. So both properties have to be satisfied. So the linearity condition is given here. And the linearity property is also called superposition property. In some textbooks, you will find that. So all our mathematics is linear because whenever we deal with mathematics, we talk about matrices. And when we deal with matrices, we are doing linear transformations because each the matrix, suppose it is an n cross n matrix, and it is being multiplied with the n cross 1 column vector x, then the equation becomes a into x equal to some column vector y. So y is equal to a into x. So y is n cross 1, a is n cross n, and x is n cross 1. So you can imagine that x comes from x vector comes from a discrete signal. Similarly, y vector comes from a discrete signal, and a represents the linear set of equations. Are you able to understand what I'm saying? So suppose you have coefficients inside the A matrix. You can take an example of a 2 cross 2 matrix. So let us say that the coefficients are A, B, C, D. And on this side, X has X1 and X2. Then Y has Y1 and Y2. So Y1 is equal to A times X1 plus B times X2. Similarly, Y2 is equal to A times X1 plus B times C times X1 plus D times X2. So you have two equations. Those are linear equations. So you are writing the y signal in terms of the x signal by using a set of linear combinations of the weights inside the matrix. So this is the idea of a matrix transformation, and all our equations and mathematics are well defined for linear situations and less defined for nonlinear situations, although there is some mathematics for nonlinear cases, but it becomes complex very soon. So the idea of using linear approximations to nonlinear uh, natural conditions. So everything in nature is nonlinear, but we always try to approximate by a linear function. So we tend to escape with it. So all of you may be aware of Taylor series, everyone?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so
Yes, sir.
in the Taylor series, you have different terms. So you have the first term, then the second term, then the third term, then the fourth term. And as you increase in the terms, it becomes more and more nonlinear. So you can approximate a highly nonlinear function with a Taylor series approximation. And most of the times you are only using the first two terms. So that is approximation up to a linear term. If you use the third term, then that is a quadratic term. Then slowly the nonlinearity increases. So I'm just giving you these ideas because later on in your study of signal processing or in study of signals, you will find that all the time you are using Taylor series to approximate natural signals. Okay, so let us come back to basic DSP. So the ideal delay system. So the delay system is given by this equation x of n minus nd, where nd is the delay. It can be a fixed positive integer, which means you are delaying on the right hand side, or it can be a negative integer, which can shift to the left hand side. So we have this as one of the systems. So an ideal delay system is a particular system. Then another system is a moving average system. So if you have a weighted average, or you want to take an average of some samples in a discrete signal, so you are doing a moving average. That means you are moving the window over which you are doing the averaging. So here k goes from minus m1 to plus m2, where m1 and m2 are variable, okay? Or at least m1 is variable. If m2 is related to m1 by a certain distance, then at least m1 is variable. So you are moving this set of two dotted lines over the entire signal and calculating out another signal, which is y of n. So y of n is the moving average filtered x of n signal. So this is some kind of a system. It is a filter because you are taking, it is a low pass filter because you are summing and then dividing. It is like an integrator. It's a summer. So you are just adding and dividing. So instead of just x of n minus k, you can have some weights for each sample also. So then it becomes a weighted average. This is just a moving average. Okay. Then you can have an accumulator. So you can show that an accumulator is a time invariant system. So these are some small examples given in the OpenAM book. So you can open the OpenAM textbook and you can check these examples. Okay. So can I go ahead? So the accumulator, the definition is y of n is equal to summation k equal to minus infinity to n x of k. Right. So here you do y of n minus n naught by changing that n to n minus n naught. Okay, fine. Shall I go ahead? So this one is interesting. This is a compressor system, and you have to show that the system is not time invariant. So we had studied the dilator and the compressor. So so causality. Listen, we have to be a little careful. And we had discussed this forward and backward difference operators on these systems. So which one is causal and whether it is causal or not, we should be careful. So as I had defined earlier, that a system is causal if for every choice of n naught, the output sequence value at the index n equal to n naught depends only on the input sequence values for n less than equal to n naught. That means any value of y of n naught should depend on x of n where n is less than equal to n naught. So if x1 of n is equal to x2 of n for n less than equal to n naught, then y1 of n is equal to y2 of n. So the system is non-anticipative. So it doesn't predict in the future. So if we talk about a forward difference, then the forward difference is defined as x of n plus 1 minus x of n. So this system is not causal because the current value of y, that is current value of y at time n, depends on the value of the future of the input x of n plus 1. So it is a violation of causality. So you can show this more formally by doing this analysis. So you can just pick up two signals, x1 of n as delta of n minus 1 and x2 of n as 0, and the corresponding output are given. So then you can show that x1 of n is equal to x2 of n for n less than equal to 0. So definition of causality requires that y of 1 of n should be equal to y2 of n, which is not the case for n equal to 0. So if you show one counterexample, then we prove that the system is non-causal. Okay. So this property that if x1 of n is equal to x2 of n, and for n less than equal to n naught, then y1 of n should be equal to y2 of n for n less than equal to n naught. This is the mathematical condition to prove causality. Now, the backward difference. So the backward difference turns out to be causal, whereas the forward difference is non-causal. Okay, so why are we discussing LTI systems? What is the motivation? First motivation is that the mathematics for LTI system is easier than systems which are not LTI. So definitely the systems which are non-linear, they are more trickier to analyze. The mathematics for analyzing higher order non-linear functions, that simply doesn't exist. Some mathematics exists at the lower order non-linearities, but it is not as sophisticated as the linear system mathematics. So this is something that we have to worry about. Non-linearities can cause instability. So we are worried about non-linear functions. And in practice, systems which are not LTI can be well approximated using LTI models. So this is the motivation. Then let us come to how to form y of n given the system impulse response h of n and the input signal x of n. So we have an operation which is called convolution. So convolution, you might have studied in the signals and systems course that consists of a sequence of operations, first flipping, then taking the product, or rather first flipping, then translating, then taking the product, and then summing. So these are the steps for convolution, but convolution is related with another operation called correlation. All of you know correlation, right? You're aware of correlation.
Yes.
So what you are effectively doing is you are trying to measure how similar a signal is with respect to another signal. When you use this equation x of k into h of n minus k, you are sliding one function over another function. And you are trying to find out how similar one function is with respect to another function. That is what you are trying to do. So you can write this convolution expression also in terms of correlation. So all that exercise you might have done in your signals and systems course. So actually what you are writing in this formula is an inner product. Okay? How many of you agree with what I have said? That what you have written in this formula is actually a dot product between two vectors. Do you agree?
Hello, sir.
Yeah.
But the second vector is inverted, right?
Yeah, so if you just ignore that for the time being, inverted means there is another signal which is being slided.
Yeah, then it is dot.
The inverted, isn't it? So what you are writing, in fact, is actually a dot product, or it is the inner product. So this convolution expression, it looks a little complicated initially, but you are just doing a similarity finding. That's what you are doing. So a convolution will have some, like any LTI system can be written in terms of convolution. Like the output of an LTI system can be written in terms of convolution. But if you don't have that time invariance thing, then you can't write the output as a convolution. You can write the output as a summation. Linearity holds. But if time invariance doesn't hold, you can't write it with convolution. This is something that you should understand. Generally, these things are not talked about in a DSP course because generally people who teach DSP courses are 1D guys. Now, I am a 2D guy because I work with images. So I know that cameras are not position invariant. So whenever you take a picture with a camera, you are not doing convolution. Okay? You are doing some kind of a linear operation, but you are not doing convolution. So this is something that one should note. So if you see the sentence here is that the convolution x convolved with h evaluated at the point n is simply a weighted sum of elements of x, where the weighting is given by h, time reversed and shifted by x. So whenever you weight another signal by the weights, then you are taking a dot product between those two signals. So these are the steps. So as I had said, that first you have to plot xk and then plot h of n minus k as a function of k. So consider an arbitrarily large negative value for n. This will result in h of n minus k being shifted very far to the left on the time axis. Then write the mathematical expression x convolved with hn and increase n gradually until the expression for x convolved with hn changes form. Record the intervals over the expression for which x convolved with hn was valid. Then you do this until you make sure that h of n minus k is shifted very far to the right on the time axis so that the product goes to 0. So then you have obtained the value of x convolved with h of n, that is equal to y of n. This is the set of operations that you have to do. So properties of convolution, number one property is very important. Convolution operation is commutative. That is, you can write x of k into h of n minus k. Summation k goes from 0 to n minus 1 or from minus infinity to plus infinity. Or you can write h of k into x of n minus k, the same summation. So this is an important property. For any two sequences, x and h, x convolved with h is equal to h convolved with x. Then the convolution operation is associative and it is distributive. So these are all very nice properties. Okay. And if you imagine this h to be a camera, then all these properties they become very, very physically interesting. Okay. I'm not going too much into image processing, otherwise, like we'll be discussing image processing, not DSP. So I'm just giving you an idea that each of these H can be a camera. Okay. So just I'm restricting myself to that statement, not more than that. And I'm just tempted to give you the idea of a microscope. Have you seen a microscope? All of you? In your school days, you might have seen a microscope.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Have you seen a microscope with different lenses? That means same microscope, okay? If you place an object below the lens, suppose lens number 1, okay? You place the same object below lens number 1, then you move the lens so that second lens comes into the picture. You take another picture, okay? Object remains the same. Have you seen such a microscope where the lenses are mounted in a circle and you can take a picture through each lens by rotating the setting? Have you ever looked at that? Or forget microscope. I just give you an idea of a microscope because each lens is a system. Each lens is H. Okay, is H1, H2 is a different lens. So let me give you another example. A camera where you are changing the focus or you are changing the zoom. All of you have DSLR cameras. Nikon, Canon, all of you have one. So when you take a picture, you focus, you rotate that circular part of the camera, right?
Yes, sir.
And so the camera remains the same. You are changing the setting. You are changing the distance between the lenses. Something you are doing. So you can think of this H1 and H2 as something like that, and think about the associative property and distributive property like that. I know I'm just going a little bit ahead, but some of you are smart, so I just wanted to poke your curiosity. Just 1 second. So when you describe a signal, you use this particular formula. So xn is equal to summation k equal to minus infinity plus infinity x of k into delta of n minus k is x convolved with delta of n. So any sequence x can be written in terms of an expression involving the Kronecker delta, because we are talking about the discrete case here. So delta is the convolutional identity, that is for any sequence x convolved with delta is equal to x. Okay. So you can use this particular property of x of n to derive the formula summation x, that convolution formula, summation k equal to minus infinity plus infinity x of k into h of n minus k. Because when you pass delta of n minus k through a system, you get h of n minus k, if the system is time invariant. So now, this one, shall I talk or not? That's what I'm a little concerned. Let me skip this. We will come to it when we talk about DFT, discrete Fourier transform. Because there is a property of DFT where convolution or circular convolution we have to use. So whatever I have just discussed, this particular formula, if you apply for a length L1 signal X and a length L2 filter H, then what is the length of Y? What is the length of y of n?
L1 plus L2 minus 1.
Yeah, L1 plus L2 minus 1. But here, there was no assumption that x and h are periodic. Okay. So now suppose you have two periodic sequences, that is x and h are periodic sequences, then what you get is called a circular convolution. So I'm not going too much in detail of the circular convolution, but this is a tricky thing. In circular convolution, you will always have the length as same as the input signal and the filter length. So if the input signal is of length capital N and the filter is also of length capital N, then your output will also be of capital N samples. So just to give you an idea that there is a different kind of convolution of periodic sequences, which is called circular convolution. So the impulse response of a system is a response to the input delta. And so for any LTI system with input X, the following relationships holds: y equal to x convolved with h. So in other words, an LTI system is simply computing a convolution, or an LTI system is completely characterized by its impulse response. So if the impulse response of an LTI system is known, we can determine the response of the system to any input. So if you pass impulse through a system and you record its output, then you know how it will behave when another signal comes in, because you can write any signal as a weighted summation of impulses. So x of n can be written in terms of x of k into delta of n minus k summation. So you can know how it will behave when any signal comes in. And x of k are just weights attached to that Dirac or the Kronecker delta at time k. So the idea that I was talking about is that for a camera, there is something called a point spread function. So when I say what is a point spread function, there are two terms, point and spread. So when you pass a point, or when you image a point source of light through a camera or a lens, which has a finite radius of, like it is not a pinhole, it has some finite radius. That lens has some finite radius. Then using ray diagrams, you can show that the point source of light will get imaged as a circular blob. That is why it is called point spread function. So if you know how these circular blobs will appear in the image, then you can reconstruct the image for any signal. So that is the idea, that you can use any signal and find out the output of LTI system. That's why LTI systems are important. So the response of a system H to the input U is called the step response. That is, if U is the unit step, then that is called the step response. So sometimes we also like to find out the step response. For example, a control system. In the control system, we excite it by a step input, and we want to study whether the control system behaves as an underdamped system or an overdamped system or a critically damped system. So all of you might have studied in your control theory course. All of you in final year, you must have done a control 1 course, the step response of a second order system. So all of you would have gone through that. The impulse response and the step response S. So step response is denoted as S, the impulse response is denoted as H. Then they are related by this expression. H of n is equal to S of n minus S of n minus 1. Because of the relationship between delta of n and U of n. So delta of n is defined as U of n minus U of n minus 1. So you can write H of n as equal to S of n minus S of n minus 1. So the impulse response of a system can be determined from its step response by first order differencing. So they are related things. So this is simple. So we represent at the y the output and the x as the input, and the block H, the series connection and parallel connections. So there are some things that I just showed in the beginning of the slides. we talked about discrete signals and talked about memory. You can talk about memory with respect to the impulse response. So an LTI system with impulse response H is memoryless if and only if H of n is equal to 0 for all n not equal to 0. Okay. That is, LTI system is memoryless if and only if the impulse response is of the form H of n is equal to k times delta n. So it is something like a constant multiplied with a Kronecker delta. So an example is an ideal amplifier. So every memoryless LTI system with input X and output Y is characterized by this equation. Okay.
Hello, sir.
Yeah.
Sir, in this it is written like K is a complex constant.
Yeah.
So
Complex
what is the significant like taking
No, then-
constant as complex?
Yeah, see, a constant, you can always talk about signals which are complex signals, and you can talk about the impulse response as being a complex number. Okay. So, or a complex function. So, generally, we keep the mathematics uh, just to ignore that there is something more complicated, something like a complex number can exist. Just like I introduced a complex sinusoid or a complex exponential, all those things I introduced. But in real cases, we use only real numbers. When you
Yes.
talk about real signals, when you talk about real systems, we only work with real signal. So
Yes,
we
yes.
drop all this complex business. But to define, we use the most general definition.
Yes, I got it, sir.
And similarly, for causality, we discussed causal signals. So now we talk about causal systems. So h of n should be 0 for all n less than 0. And for a sequence, x of n is 0 for all n less than 0. So we have a causal system and a causal sequence. Or you can say the left-hand sequence or a right-hand sequence. That way we define sequences. So these are the properties. I'm just showing you these things so that we have covered all this inverse of a system. So these are all the definitions. So, and this is the definition for Bibo stability. That means your impulse response should be absolutely summable. So now this is the most important part of the lecture today. So I had slowly introduced you to the idea of eigenfunction. So how that idea of eigen came. So an input x to a system H is said to be an eigensequence of the system H with the eigenvalue lambda if the corresponding output y is of the form y equal to lambda x. That means the system H is acting as an ideal amplifier for each of its eigensequences x. And the amplifier gain is given by the eigenvalue lambda. So when you write y equal to hx, so whenever you say you pass x as a complex exponential, so you write h of e power j omega into e power j omega n. So the mod of h of e power j omega, that is your eigenvalue. So if you see here, the lambda, your x and y are related by a constant only. That means x is in the same direction as y. It is only being scaled. Its direction is not being changed. So h is only acting as an ideal amplifier. That means as a scalar or a constant times something. So the amplifier gain is given by the corresponding eigenvalue lambda. So what are eigensequences of LTI systems? So this already you know, it is a complex sinusoid. So mark that only for some x, y is related as equal to lambda x, not for all x. So those x are called the eigensequences of the system H. Okay. So can I go to the next slide? So after today's class, like I would have covered discrete time systems with description of the systems and everything. Only thing that you have to do is practice problems from Oppenheim and Schaefer. And next class would be about DTFT or discrete time Fourier transforms of signals. That is, I'm trying to describe these systems in the by using the frequency response or by using the spectrum. So I will have a few classes with DTFT and then shift to Z transform, because DTFT is the Fourier transform of a discrete sequence, and similarly a Z transform will also take input as a discrete sequence. So we'll see the connections between Z transform and DTFT. Before I come to Z transform, I want to introduce DTFT. And the next class after, the next topic after Z transform would be how to describe systems in terms of phase and amplitude spectrum. So that is how to think about systems in terms of phase and amplitude spectrum. That would be interesting. Okay. So every complex exponential is an eigensequence of all LTI systems. So for an LTI system H with impulse response small h, h of z to the power n is equal to h of z into z to the power n, where z is a complex constant. So this is a complex exponential. So where h of z is equal to this. This is actually a z transform. So we'll see like how Z transform is related with DTFT and all that. So this expression is the Z transform of the impulse response H of n. So Z to the power n is an eigensequence of an LTI system, and H of Z is its corresponding eigenvalue, because when you pass Z to the power n through a system H, it is giving an output as H of Z into Z to the power n, where H of Z is just a amplifier. It is just a constant, the corresponding eigenvalue. And the eigenvalue can be computed by using the Z transform of H of n. So this capital H is known as the system function or transfer function of the system H. So here it is, because you have this complex number Z, it is raised to the power Z to the power minus n. So that is the definition of the Z transform. So from above, we can see that the response of an LTI system to a complex exponential is the same complex exponential multiplied by the complex factor h of z, which is the eigenvalue of that system.
Sir,
Yes.
but sir, can we say the eigensequences as eigenfunction also?
Yeah,
Is there
because
any difference?
function means you talk about, this function is a discrete function. That's it. Sequence means a discrete function. Function can be continuous time. So then you talk about eigenfunction.
Okay.
So you can have continuous time LTI systems, then you talk about eigenfunctions. And here you have discrete time LTI system, you talk about eigensequences.
Okay.
Okay. So,
Sir, so they are at the
Yeah.
same place, right, sir? Like,
same place means? I didn't understand. What is place?
in continuous time, we pass eigenfunction to
Yeah.
the system and we get eigenfunction and in multiplied by eigenvalue, right, sir? So
Yes,
similar
yes.
case is here also, right?
Similar
sir?
case.
So,
Same thing, same thing, same thing.
yes, okay.
No difference. Concept-wise, it is the same thing.
Yes, sir.
So now, you see, things get a little bit more interesting. So you can consider an LTI system with input X, output Y, and a system function capital H. Okay. So now we are talking about in terms of a system function or a transfer function. That is, we are transforming the impulse response to some domain. The previous slide was transforming impulse response H of n to the Z domain using this formula. So this is actually the formula for Z transform. Okay. So we'll come to this when I talk about the Z transform in the Z transform chapter. But already we are talking about this in terms of a transformation. This transformation can also be a Fourier transformation. Okay. So instead of Z, we'll have e power minus j omega. That is the dt of t. Then here you will write h of e power j omega. Okay. So all of these are very nicely connected. So now we are thinking in terms of how to write y of n in terms of x of n, where we bring in capital H of z, the transform domain representation of the impulse response. Okay. So suppose your input sequence x can be represented as a linear combination of complex exponentials. When can you do this? What you have studied, where you can do this? Anyone? You have studied somewhere that you can write as a weighted summation of complex exponentials, any signal, input signal.
Fourier series.
Yes, Fourier series. Very good. So you can think of a discrete time Fourier series, for example. So here it is not Fourier series. Z is a complex number. So you can write any signal x of t in terms of the Fourier series ak e power minus jk omega naught t, and omega naught is equal to 2 pi by capital T. Okay. So you can write any sequence or any similarly you can write x of n in terms of its discrete time Fourier series. So the way we try to build this idea that any sequence x can be written as a linear combination of complex exponentials. We already know that complex exponentials are eigen functions. So when you pass a signal x of n, what happens? Which can be written like this. So complex exponentials are eigenfunctions of LTI systems. So we can write y of n in terms of ak into h of zk, zk to the power n. Because if you see in the previous expression, it was h of z to the power n is equal to h of z into z to the power n. So where h of z is given like this. So you can write ak zk to the power n as x of n and h of zk into z to the power n. Okay, that is y of n. If you can represent x of n as ak into zk to the power n. So each zk to the power n behaves like a complex exponential or an eigenfunction, and it is a complex exponential, and therefore it is an eigenfunction. So it comes out as h of zk into zk to the power n. So the input to an LTI system can be expressed as a linear combination of complex exponentials. Then the output can also be expressed as a linear combination of the same complex exponentials. Okay. And this formula can be used to determine the output of an LTI system from its input, which does not require convolution. There is no need of convolution here. But this is only valid when you can write x of n in terms of complex exponential, weighted sum of complex exponentials. Turns out that you can do it for discrete time as a discrete time Fourier series or continuous time for a continuous time Fourier series. And we'll see that we can write this. We can actually do this. So the idea of eigen sequences is very powerful. So without using convolution, you can do this. So I hope you have understood. Anyone? It's slightly advanced, but I just wanted to do this. Normally, in any DSP course, this much is not taught, but I'm just trying to make it a little interesting for the MTech guys, because I know that the MTech guys have already gone through a DSP course. So at least they should be involved. They should have some extra thing in this course. One can teach DSP from a little higher level, but I'm just trying to stick to basic. Okay. So can I go to the next slide? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. I think this is the end. So like we are done. So today's class is over, and we have discussed both signals which are discrete case and systems which are discrete. And in the discrete systems, we have looked at various properties of the systems, and we have looked at causality, linearity, time invariance, and memory of a system. So we have looked at various properties of systems. We have looked at the important idea of the eigensequence of a system, and all of this we have discussed by using simple mathematics, no non-linear mathematics. That is important, and we'll stick to linear transformations in this course. Now, one extra thing I wanted to do, I wanted to give you an example of how to write convolution in terms of a matrix vector product. Has anybody done that? You all do convolution by writing out the sequence and then using the operations of flipping and then sliding and then product and all that. How to write a matrix vector product and compute convolution. Have you done this? Anyone? How to write
It's a two-way place
filter?
matrix. We can
Yes.
two-way place matrix. We can.
Very good, very good. What's your name?
Madhukar, sir. Madhukar.
Yeah, you are a BTech or an MTech?
MTech, sir. MTech first year.
Very good, very good. So the UG guys, have you come across matrix which is called the Toeplitz matrix? Anyone? I'm just curious, the UG people, the UG students. No one? Have you come across a matrix which is having a particular structure? So I wanted to do that. So maybe I will ask my TS to give you an assignment. So if you do that assignment, it will be good for you so that you can derive that Toeplitz matrix. If I give you a sequence H and a sequence X, then how can you write convolution as a matrix vector product? That is the assignment. So I'll ask my TS to formulate a homework for you, and you can do that as an assignment. So there will be something extra which you may not have come across earlier in your signals and systems course. Okay, so I think we will end now. Let me just take the attendance and we will stop. Let me open up ERP and then take the attendance for today. Just 2 minutes. I'm just opening up ERP. Okay, so please respond to your roll call. Shubham Meena. Shubham Meena absent. A. Yashwant.
Present, sir.
Okay. Ambati Guru Rajesh.
Yes, sir.
Arnav.
Present, sir.
Prakash Chauhan. Prakash Chauhan, absent. Siddharth Dave.
Present, sir.
Divyanshu Kumar. Divyanshu Kumar. Divyanshu absent. G. Anusha.
Present, sir.
A. Kirti
Present,
Varshit. Sai Reddy. Akshay Sai Reddy.
Present, sir.
Lohit Bande Boina.
Present, sir.
Madhu Kumar Meena. Madhu Kumari Meena.
Present, sir.
P. Srutish Kumar.
Present, sir.
Rahul Agarwal. Rahul Agarwal. Sumed Lodi.
Present, sir.
Sumed. Okay. Utkarsh Agarwal.
Present, sir.
V. Kushulu. V. Kushulu absent. Sai Nishant. P. Sai Nishant.
Present, sir.
Sai Rohit. B. Sai Rohit. Is absent. Divyansh Singh. Harshit Barnwal. Harshit Barnwal absent. Ishan Bhutani. Ishan Bhutani is absent. Jayesh. Jayesh is also absent. Lekhraj Parihar.
Present, sir.
Manavendra Singh Kushwaha. Manavendra Singh Kushwaha. Both of them are absent. Sai Prem.
Present, sir.
Nitish Kannan.
Present, sir.
Nitish Kumar. Nitish Kumar absent. P. Amruta.
Present, sir.
Pranjal Singh. Pranjal Singh. Pratyush Jaiswal. Pratyush Jaiswal is absent. Ravi Kumar Meena.
Present, sir.
Ritik Raj. Ritik Raj. Sanket Kanta. Sanket. Y. Lakshmi Priyanka.
Sir, Sanket Kanta is present. Hello.
Okay, fine. Then Y. Lakshmi Priyanka. Y. Lakshmi Priyanka. Then Chinmay Chakrabarti.
Yes, sir.
Chinmay Chakrabarti. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Then Rituraj Datta.
Present, sir.
Nuruddin.
Present, sir.
Then Abhinav Japesh.
Present, sir.
Abrar Hussain.
Present, sir.
A. Anisha Reddy.
Present, sir.
Aman Kumar Sharma. Aman Kumar Sharma absent. Aman Kumar Sharma absent. Ankit Kumar.
Present, sir.
Devraj Maji.
Present,
Devraj
sir.
Maji. अच्छा. P. Venkata Manohar.
Present, sir.
P. Cherisha.
Present, sir.
Subhadip Mandal. Subhadip Mandal. Vibhanshu Ranjan.
Present, sir.
Yash.
Present, sir.
Abhijay Mitra. Abhijay Mitra. Abhinav Kumar Jha. Abhinav Kumar Jha. Anshul Tembhare.
Present, sir.
Manot